So you mentioned chamber music a little bit,
Yeah.
and even in your earlier days, and that's great because, Albert, what I admire so much about you, among so many other things, is as a pianist, you're one of the few. I mean, I think our generation is becoming more open to playing chamber music as a pianist, but you're someone that really takes it on and does such a wholehearted, amazing job with chamber music. So I'm really curious, how has your work in chamber music shaped who you are as a musician today?
It's a great question. Also, thank you. You're so kind, and yeah, I hope we get to play
Yeah,
together.
yeah,
I, yeah, it's a very good question, and it's I guess it's hard to answer, but I just know chamber music is very important to
yeah,
me, and it has
yeah,
been for since the beginning.
yeah,
Maybe that's to do with this monastery upbringing,
yeah.
where we it was all chamber music, either
Right.
in the choir or in, in playing. But I feel like um well, I'm very glad that it's this. I feel like in the past decades ago, it was either you're a soloist or you're
Yeah,
a chamber musician,
exactly.
and I
Yeah,
feel like that's sort of changing a little bit.
yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the music that you play, it's we're so lucky as pianists,
Yeah.
and part of it for me that has drawn me to chamber music is just loving the repertoire that you get to play that's not for solo piano.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's endless. Another part of it, obviously, is the chamber musicians I've been able to collaborate with,
Right.
and I really mean it. It has been very very inspiring.
Mm.
I remember being um, getting out of some collaborations and for a week after sort of seeing music
Mhm.
in a different way, and it's hard to explain why, I guess, because it's a very deeply human connection.
Yeah.
Um, it's something to do with our maybe their identification with the music that you're playing,
Yeah.
and it's like almost like having a three-way conversation with a composer.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you were like eavesdropping into something like this, you would almost be part of it without
Right.
doing anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
chamber yeah, has that component, I feel, but
Yeah.
it also has challenges. I mean, sometimes it's some collaborations are tough, and you can also learn from them.
Right.
Um, and yeah, it's I feel like it's great to collaborate with non-pianists because a lot of what we try to do with our instruments
Yeah.
um, actually is imitating or is something that other instruments do much more easily. So
Right. Right.
having that in your ear is is great, and also while you learn things about phrasing from
Yeah.
certain people, you learn
Yeah.
things about just the intensity or the energy that they bring to the music.
Right.
um, you get so many fresh ideas from
Yeah.
people that you play with, and then whenever you have a tough time in a collaboration, you also learn about how trying to analyze why you're having a tough time and trying
Mm.
to look at the music and then questioning yourself and
Yeah.
questioning what you're doing and maybe realizing that something, because when you play with someone who's great, they also adapt to you a little bit,
Yeah.
which makes things easier for you, and it makes you think you're doing a great job, and maybe
Right.
it's not always the case.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I always enjoyed um, that part of doing something together with
Right.
someone else in
Right.
music. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel
Like.
like,
Mhm.
yeah, well, I don't know, it's like it's also so clear in many piano writing passages where it's supposed to sound like a string quartet,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
like different roles of different voices.
Yeah.
They're also more clear into your music, so in a way that's easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other hand, it's also harder being at the mercy of what the other person does, and
Yeah.
especially if you struggle with something technically, you're like
Right.
you yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you have to compromise a little
Yeah.
bit, so it's a bit of a sacrifice and a gain, and it
Right.
makes things interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think in recent years I've really thought about this more, and I think chamber music in its most pure art form is kind of the backbone of like all classical music, whether it be
I
playing
think so.
symphonic literature, even solo pieces. Like I last year I was working quite intensively on some Bach suites, and
Mm,
it's obviously for one instrument, but the way Bach wrote that music, it was chamber music because he wrote lines for different voices. It just happened to be
mhm,
on one instrument.
mhm.
And I mean, I'm sure you feel the same way with your solo piano literature where I
Absolutely, yeah.
mean, I mean, you have 10 fingers and it's almost like you have a little mini orchestra within your hands. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, kind of what we were talking about before, where in previous generations, I think if you were classified as a chamber musician or purely chamber musician, there was almost kind of like a stigma to it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like you're not a solo musician, you know. But like now these days, I think
Yeah.
more and more soloists are embracing chamber music, and I think that's a good thing. So that's
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what you say is so right. And I yesterday actually I was realizing that to another level, where even opera is chamber music in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because yeah, I think it was a Fischer Dieskau interview where they were talking about his doing opera roles. Of course, he's famous for his leader performances and recordings and all that. But he
Right.
said that he felt that there was no difference
Mm.
between opera and songs
Yeah.
because it's just music.
Right.
It's just all these conventions that sometimes go around that, or opera singers, them needing to play or sing in a certain way or being like
Yeah.
the star or something, but it's just nothing to do with the music. I mean,
Right.
sometimes it can be very exciting and make it, but and then so I went to listen to some Dieskau Verdi arias or something, and it was amazing hearing that. It was very powerful actually in
Yeah.
a not so operatic way, but
Right.
him like analyzing the text. And I guess the purpose of music is always the same. I
Yeah.
feel no matter what it is, whether it's chamber
Yeah.
music or solo or
Yeah.
opera, or many Mozart concertos are chamber music too.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that comes. Sorry, I'm talking too much. But
No,
I guess it is a podcast.
it's about you. So please.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like with pianists it's harder because as a cellist, for example, yourself, or you always have to play with a pianist if you play sonata,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you play string quartets, and it's
Yeah.
just part of what you do.
Right.
And for some reason, pianists do that less. It's either they're called accompanists, which is
Yeah.
a term that whatever, or they're soloists and they won't
Yeah.
play
Yeah.
with them.
Right.
And I don't think that's necessarily the way, in my opinion, but
Yeah.
there's many opinions about it, and
Yeah.
and they're acceptable.
Well, and the thing is, I really kind of wish we got rid of the idea of an accompanist role, or that word in general, because I think even if you're playing concertos with orchestra, I mean, there are a lot of the literature, as you obviously know, the orchestral role is just as important as the
Yeah.
piano or whatever solo
Yeah.
instrument, right? Like
Yeah.
it works because they're unified, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I just
Yeah.
I feel like we need to stop thinking about like things in a soloist hierarchy, accompanist down here kind of thing, and it's kind of like together. I feel like
Yeah.
So
As a pianist, and many pianists will love you you're saying that. But I mean, I feel like it's more like a logistical term rather
yeah,
than a musical term.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
And it's not. I feel like maybe it's, but it's also hard for me to say because I'm biased as a pianist. If I hear a performance, I don't know, even someone as incredible as Shafran as a cellist. Well, I don't know if you like this, but I know he's very extreme and all that.
Yeah.
But it's always funny because no matter who he plays with, then the piano is behind him with the lid closed and like not doing much. And it's kind of a funny concept.
Yeah.
Which I enjoy it always more whenever the pianist has more texture and there's more energy coming from the piano. And I mean, I guess it's all of this is just looking at the music. It is like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.